Hey everyone, my name is Denise Brown and I work and support family caregivers. The name of my company is the Caregiving Years Training Academy, and I started helping family caregivers in 1990, and then I launched my first business to help them in 1995. And I also help my parents who are 89 and 86 and live about 10 minutes from me. So I, as a small business owner, worry all the time. And then because I help my parents, I worry all the time. So I try to do my best to figure out how do I manage the worries. Several years ago, a participant in one of my training programs talked about her mom and how her mom just couldn't cope anymore. And it made me think it's not that her mom couldn't cope, it's that her mom had too much to cope with. And at some point, we get coped out. So if you think about those who might have a disability or a chronic illness, they're losing independence, they're losing friends, they're losing a good day. All the losses start to add up. And then at some point, I think you're just like, you know what, I can't cope with anymore. We're coped out. That insight led me to think about compassion fatigue, because oftentimes we look at that as this feeling of being worn out. I thought if we got specific about compassion fatigue, then we can be specific about what we need to heal from. So, for instance, we get tired of coping. That's a caregiving fatigue. That's part of the umbrella term compassion fatigue. So, over the years, I've really gotten very specific about what wears us out, especially during a caregiving experience. And I came up with the caregiving fatigues. We're going to talk about one today, but there's many. And I have a new book that I'll share the link to before we close today that talks about 12. But I have another book that I'll probably start working on in the summer where there's another 12. So there could be 36 different caregiving fatigues that we can really speak to with words. I think the other thing that's helpful is if we're specific about what wears us out, we're using words that help people understand what we're tired of. So, for instance, before we started today, my mom called me and said, I made an appointment with the doctor. We're going tomorrow. Now, I haven't taken time off in a long time. I tried to take time off in October, but my dad was hospitalized, so I couldn't. And I had cleared my schedule tomorrow and Friday for time off. So now I have to go to the doctor's appointment with my parents tomorrow, which you hate to say it makes you mad, but gosh, I just think, I can't just clear my schedule. And my mom will say, you don't have to come with us. Well, they can't hear the doctor, they can't advocate effectively for themselves. How are they going to maneuver into the doctor's office? You know, it's the reality is they can't go by themselves. So I will go with them. So it just gets me tired of not having control over my schedule. So we lose that. And then we get tired of appointments. Oftentimes, people will talk about family caregivers and how we don't go to the doctors. Well, we're tired of going to doctor's appointments. We just get fatigued from appointments. We get fatigued from a calendar of schedules. Okay, so let's talk today about worry fatigue. So, just curious, how many would call yourself a worrier? Feel free to type in the chat room if you consider yourself to be a worrier. If you were to diagnose yourself as a worrier. Okay, so at times 100%. I think about worries as being sometimes like the rush of thoughts. Oh, okay. Worry a lot. Julita, I think is how you say your name, which is beautiful. If I mispronounced it, please let me know. Okay, so Julita is saying her mind constantly is running on worry. Right, yeah. And I think about it, that constant running is like this rush of water just flowing over us, right? We're just awash with worries. And I think once we start worrying, it's hard to backtrack because it just puts us down this whole ocean of what if, how will, when will. So for you, what's it like to worry? And you can feel free to type in your thoughts in the chat room. So for me, it feels like I'm wringing my hands, right? And there's tension. Derek is writing the tension. Yes, right. And Derek has a really interesting insight where you're trying to fix things that you might not be able to. That's exactly right. Sometimes the worrying is part of our search for control over situations that are out of our control, but we're trying to control them. And Julieta is talking about that there's these thoughts that just overload. And what's interesting is it's thoughts in our head, but it's an output of energy. We are using our energy around thoughts, oftentimes thoughts about our future. So I used to coach a client who cared for her mother, and she had a lot of worries about keeping her mom at home. And if they had a bad day during our coaching call, she would say, I think I need to place my mom in a nursing home. We had a terrible day today. And I'll ask for specifics. And so one time she said, well, you know what? We had 2 incontinence issues. I wasn't able to get my mom to the bathroom in time. And then we had accidents. And I think this is still my client talking. I think I need to really think about, I can't provide the level of care that she needs at home. So I asked more specific questions of my client. What was going on that you couldn't get to your mom on time? And then she talked about homeschooling. She actually homeschooled her children while she was caring for her mom. So she got distracted by homeschooling. So I said, well, what if we put more of a schedule in place around your mom's toileting? What if there was an alarm that you set every 2 hours just to remind yourself to take your mom to the bathroom? And she was like, oh my gosh, I think that will work. Yes, we could do that. So she had already jumped into the future that her mom needs nursing home placement rather than staying in the moment and thinking, this is the moment where I have a problem. What's the solution for the problem right now? Oftentimes, our worries will take us into the future. We try to control the future and put plans in place for what has not yet happened, when the opportunity is right here in the present to solve what's worrying us. So I'm curious, what's the worry that keeps you up at night? And you can type in the chat room. So I have a business coach who talks about money and health as 2 of the reasons that we wake up in the middle of the night. And I'm curious what wakes you up in the middle of the night. Recently, I've been waking up at 4. And so then I started researching, what is it that wakes us up at certain times during the night? Now, this could be completely wrong, but it helped me to read that if you wake up between, I think it was the hours of 3 and 5, it's because you're grieving. There's a sadness in your life that you're trying to work through. So once I read that article, I felt like, okay, now I know what to do. I woke up 4 o'clock the next day, and we had been through a grief movement class with one of my certified caregiving consultants, and she talked about the power of giving yourself a hug. So I laid in bed and gave myself a hug. And so that was part of the compassion I gave to myself for grieving and sadness. So instead of waking up at 4 a.m. thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to fall back asleep? What am I going to do if I can't fall back asleep? What is my day going to be like if I get up now? Instead, I thought, okay, now I know what's causing this. And it really is. I have some situations that are causing me grief and sadness. I just gave myself gentle hugs and it worked. I was able to fall back asleep and I felt better during my day. So Colleen is talking about the worry around adult children, and Sue is talking about the worry about parents living by themselves. Yes, these are worries, right? And it is awful to have these worries because sometimes we're worrying about situations that we don't see all the time, right? So Sue, I think about your parents living safely by themselves. Well, you know what? You're not there 24/7 seeing what's going on. And with my parents, we have help. So I get reports and I get an idea, but I don't know exactly what's going on. And that can put us down that road of imagination. And we have a tendency to imagine the worst. One of the programs that I train on is for former family caregivers who want to start a business to consult with current family caregivers. So, in essence, it's a life coach training. And as part of that training, I developed what we call to be tools. And I actually borrowed this from the life coach training perspective. If you work with a life coach, they might have put you through a life wheel assessment where it's a wheel. Typically, it's got 12 different pie slices, and each pie slice has a word that reflects your category in your life: wellness, spirituality, relationships, money. That was a really effective way to start a conversation with someone. So I took that idea and then just customized it for caregiving experiences. And one of the tools is a worry wheel. So when you look at this worry wheel, what's a word that jumps out to you? Feel free to type in the chat room. And Julita, it's interesting that you watch a certain type of TV show before bedtime, which is crime and mysteries and horror movies. I mean, it seems to make sense that that probably wouldn't be something good to watch before bedtime, but it's something that you enjoy, which is why you watch it. So the idea that you're just kind of adjusting that when you watch it and how you watch it before you go to bed can help too. So a word that often jumps out to me when I look at this worry wheel is enough. I'm curious if anybody else worries about doing enough, having enough, being enough. Oh, yeah, future's a good one too, right? And I think the words all tie together. So when I think about enough, I think about, have I done enough for my parents? Have I done enough for my business? Have I done enough for myself? And oftentimes it feels like I come up short when I think about the answer. Oh, I could do more for my parents. I could spend more time with them. I could volunteer to do more for them. But you know what? When I start to go down that road, I think, but I don't want to, right? And then I feel guilty because I'm totally honest by saying, I feel good about how much I'm doing. Now, from my parents' perspective, of course, they think probably I should be doing more, except they don't want me to go to the doctor's appointment with them tomorrow. So it's always that the pendulum, it swings back and forth. And certainly worrying about our future, especially after the year that we've gone through. We can worry about our future as it relates to the world. And if we stay connected to the news of the world, we worry about India and what's going to happen and what's the impact on us. And then if you've been in a caregiving situation for a significant period of time, you might worry about how will you show up in your future after caregiving ends, because you feel like, the stress is taking a toll on my health. It's taking a toll on my savings. What will my future be? Then I think we also wonder about what's our own future in terms of our own end of life. How much time do we have left? How do we use that time in a way that feels significant and impactful? I just read an article the other day where it talked about our insight about time, and that oftentimes we feel happier when we feel like we're using our time more effectively. I will say though, if you are in a situation where you work a lot and you're raising kids and you might be worrying about family members and helping them, your energy is going to be small. So we think, okay, I should make better choices about how to use my time, but I don't have a lot of downtime. And when I have downtime, the only thing I can do is just lay on the couch because that's all the energy I have. So then we start to go down that road of, but am I using my time as wisely as possible? I think an overlooked life skill is the ability to relax. We often just haven't figured out how to relax in our day. Oftentimes we hear the message around we have to take care of ourselves. But if we're going 60 miles an hour to manage everything that's required of us in our day, it can be difficult to go from 60 to 0. There has to be some ability to transfer, right? From going all out to relaxing. And we don't really necessarily have that. So thinking about the rituals that can help you with relaxing. How can you give yourself a break to relax? And part of that is to manage the worries. How can I stop the worrying just for a few moments so I can relax? I used to be on a speakers bureau that delivered presentations during lunch to employers, for employers, and it was through their employee assistance program or their work life benefit. So oftentimes I would deliver a presentation to a group of employees around caregiving, work life balance, and stress. And I gave a presentation to a group that worked in a call center. And there was a young man that was really interested in the presentation.
Thank you for showing us your home.
You bet.
Hi, Teresa. I'm going to go ahead and mute you. He was sitting in the front row, intently listening. And we talked about worries. And he actually shared something that I thought was so interesting because he's a young man. He was probably 23 years old, first job out of school. And he was having a difficult time getting to work on time. So you would jump to the conclusion that a young man having a difficult time getting to work in the morning is staying up too late partying, having too much of a good time. The truth was he was staying up too late worrying, and he was worrying about his family. So he connected to a counselor who said, I get the worrying. Let's control the worrying. So he set his alarm for 30 minutes. And the last thing he did before he fell asleep was worry for 30 minutes. And then he told himself, I've taken care of my worries. Now I can fall asleep. And it worked. He was able to get up because he slept better at night. He was able to get up and get to work on time. Okay. So, what do we worry about? It's interesting we think about worries as it relates to our past and our future. We worry about what could happen, but we also worry about what did happen and whether or not we could have done something to prevent it or improve it or stop it. We also worry about what is happening and we think, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do about what's happening. We worry about whether we do enough. So we judge ourselves around how much we do, thinking we should do more or different or better. We had a conference earlier, I guess it was in early April. It's hard to keep track of time. It was last month, and I gave a presentation around our reviews, meaning we review ourselves throughout our day because we live in a society that kind of turns off reviews, right? We review the restaurant we just went to, we review our doctor. We live in a society where we review. At work, we're reviewed. And so I think it turns us into a habit of reviewing ourselves. So we can review whether or not we did enough or if we did good enough, right? We have a tendency to worry about, oh my gosh, did I say the right things? Could I have said it differently, better? Did I look goofy? And because everything is out there, social media puts us out there, we get reviewed. So people will post comments reviewing us, whether or not it's appropriate, doesn't matter, we get reviews. So we are reviewing ourselves and it feels like the world is reviewing us. And that can sometimes be paralyzing for us because it feels like we can't please anyone, ourselves or outside of ourselves. So if you're a people pleaser, that's hard. It's hard to figure out how do I manage reviews so that I'm not twisting and turning in the wind, trying to please everyone but myself. And then we get stuck in the worries around, well, I don't know what could happen. So we're trying to predict what could happen. And if you're caring for family members with a disease process, that's really challenging because even if you are well-versed in a disease process, it never necessarily goes the course that you read about. There's always something that's different. I think about my parents and their bodies, and I think if I just had an X-ray machine that showed me when something was going wrong, it would make it so much easier. But we don't. We don't know. We do what we can, right? We take blood pressure, we take temperature, we do a quick assessment of how they look, and then we think, okay, I have enough. But then there's always something that happens that we think, darn it, I missed that. I missed that. We also ran into a situation around prediction based on 2020. Who could have predicted that 2020 would have been like that? Who could have predicted that you went to work one day and then you didn't go back? Who could have predicted that we couldn't visit family members in a long-term care facility or in a hospital? So all of a sudden, everything changed and we had to adjust. We couldn't predict it, but yet we still have to manage it. And we worry about managing the unpredictable. I also think if you've been in situations throughout your life where the unpredictable happened, it's hard to trust that there's anything predictable in your life. That's difficult. That's hard. It's hard to trust the moments. Okay, so I talked about all these things to worry about, right? Oh my gosh, we probably were really worrying as I was talking about all the worrying. So I figured out something that helps me, and that is this idea that every worry needs a plan. So when I start to worry, I think, okay, what's the plan for this worry? My mom was critically ill in 2015. She had internal bleeds that were difficult, almost impossible to stop. Ultimately, they stopped them by removing a third of her stomach. And after she had had something like 25, 26 blood transfusions. My mom did, my, my mom is alive because of her strong willpower, which is awesome. And yet you can imagine also trying. So at one point, she was in the hospital for this extensive stay, recovering from surgery. And then it seemed like she was bleeding again. And she was just done. And she said, I want out of this hospital. I want to go to a different hospital. And if you're in the Chicagoland area, she was in a hospital on the Northwest side in her own room. And she wanted to go to a hospital in Maywood, Loyola, which has semi-private rooms. It's an old hospital. We've been there because my father was hospitalized there. And I said, Mom, you're not going to like it there. Those rooms are small. They're semi-private. I don't care. And she took her remote that controlled the TV in her room and she was banging on her bed rails. Get me out of here. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get her out of here. Okay. So we transfer her. She gets to Loyola. Guess what? She hates it. So so she gets transferred on Friday. On Sunday, she's like, get me out of here. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to figure out how to transfer her back to Resurrection. Well, that was not an easy feat, but we did it. So I got her back to Resurrection, 10 p.m. on a Monday night. Tuesday morning, she calls me and says, you know, they told me that the bleed stopped. That was one of the things that happened on Saturday. She said, but you know what? It looks like it started again. I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Now what are we going to do? So I thought, you know what? We need a plan for these suspected bleeds. So I said, okay, who's with you right now? Turned out my brother and sister-in-law were in the hospital room with her. I had my dad come with me. We had a small meeting in her hospital room. And I said, okay, if you are bleeding right now again, what do you want to do? She said, I want to stay here. I said, okay, great. There was a discussion and dissension among the other siblings I have about where my mom should receive care. I had a sibling that wanted her to stay at Loyola, was really mad that she left. And I said, well, how do you want to manage this with my older sibling if she gives us a hard time about you staying here? And she said, I don't care. I'm staying here. I said, okay, great. Now that I know what the plan is, I'm good to go. That thought, every worry needs a plan, took me out of inaction and put me into action. So as you think about the worries that you have, what could be a plan? So let's take a look at our plan wheel. So we've pinpointed a worry And we've pinpointed the worry by selecting one word. And now we can think about creating the plan with another word. So, for instance, the story that I told about what do we do if my mom is bleeding again? My plan was to meet. It was to meet and then communicate. Ask, what do we do? What's your plan? What's our plan? What if this happens? How do you want to manage it? So you can start with one word, but you can see how it actually leads into a second word. So my mom had called me today and said, we've got an appointment tomorrow at the doctor's office. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm whispering it to you because I want it to be a secret. But anyway, I want to just have a day off, a time to myself. So I debated, should I delegate? Should I ask one of my siblings to take this appointment? And I thought ultimately it will be less of an impact with me if I go to the appointment, which sounds crazy, but you know what it's like when you try to delegate. Sometimes it just does feel easier to do it yourself. And I appreciate that that's not common wisdom, but sometimes it is a little easier if you just feel like, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself, because we're trying to also save ourselves the impact. So if my brother goes and if he doesn't manage the appointment in an effective way, I am more impacted than if I just go, so I can control the impact. So sometimes delegating isn't the right plan. And I will also mention that sometimes it is if we think about who we're delegating to. So I talked about waking up at 4 a.m. So what am I going to do about that? I thought, well, I'm going to delegate this to Google. So I went to Google and typed, why do I wake up at 4 a.m.? Google told me. So sometimes it's delegating to technology rather than a person. Sometimes it's delegating it to a different day. It could be that I think, you know what, I've done enough today. I'm going to delegate that task, that responsibility to tomorrow. That's my plan. I'm worried about it. I'm not necessarily in the best place with my energy, so I'm going to delegate it to tomorrow. Before I fall asleep, if I am really starting to worry about something, I will tell myself, you know what? When you wake up tomorrow morning, you'll know exactly what to do. I'm taking care of the worry. I have a plan because I think when you wake up, you'll know what to do. And so when I wake up the next morning, typically I have an idea about what to do because I got rest, right? We can think more clearly when we're rested. If we're too stressed out, it's too hard to think clearly. Sometimes we just need to experiment. I think of experimenting as another overlooked life skill. I developed a concept that stages the caregiving experience, and I developed it in 1997, and I've refined it and tweaked it and really tried to keep it current. And in the second stage, which is the freshman caregiver, where you're starting to help, I talk about experimenting because we oftentimes are too attached to an outcome. It has to be a success, and if it's not, it's a failure. And what that does is it removes the ability to find the compromise, the middle ground, a combination of solutions that could work. If we experiment, then we're open to the possibilities. We're curious about what could work. So then we start to try different things. We ask different people. We might be flexible with the schedule. And because of that experiment, we might uncover a solution that we never thought of. But because we were open to it, we found it. So sometimes a plan is just about experimenting. Well, I'm going to try a couple things and see what works, see what doesn't, and then decide what to do based on that information. Because when you're experimenting, you're also getting some really good information. Asking is another great plan. I used to do a podcast and I had a guest who came on who had written a book about happiness. And she said, one way to set a really effective intention is by creating a question. So I actually offer questions for you. I have a Sunday newsletter where I create a question that's an intention that you can ask every day for the week. So last year, I was in a situation that was very stressful for me. And it just seemed like I was not going to figure this one out. A company was intent on suing me. I guess that's the only way to describe it. And I thought, gosh, they've got a lot of resources. I know I'm in the right, but their resources are going to be greater than I know I'm in the right. So I would take a walk and fret and think, how is this going to work out? It's just me. My resources are very limited versus this huge company with all these resources. I thought, well, what's my question? So I came up with a question. So once I started worrying about it, I would instead ask myself a question. And the question was, in what wonderful, wonderful, lucrative way will this work out for me? And guess what? It actually worked out in a wonderful, lucrative way. Who would have thought? I mean, it just never seemed possible. But because I kept asking the question, my mind looked for a way for it to work out in a wonderful, lucrative way. So now I like to think about questions that could open up possibilities. So even though it doesn't seem like a question is a plan, it is. So you could think about a question to ask yourself, a way to stay curious. How will this work out for me? Who could support me? What answer will I learn today? What resource will I find out about today? So you ask the question, your mind looks for the answer. And then building, I think, is really interesting in terms of a plan. So it could be building support. It could be building a solution. It could be building a coalition. It could be building resources. So, what can you build to help with a worry? It could be building a schedule, building a routine, building time off, whatever it is that you feel like this will help me. That's a plan. And then, certainly, replenishing is a good plan. When the worries start to really take over, it could be, you know what? I've worried enough. I'm ready to replenish. So, how can I give back to myself? I gave a lot away to my worries. How am I going to give back to myself? I'm curious which word really strikes you as you look at this wheel. You're welcome to type in the chat room, or if anybody would like to unmute, feel free to unmute as well. I'll just mention one other thing about ask. So I talked about asking questions of ourselves. Oh, build. Oh, build and communicate. Yeah. And what's so interesting, build and change, right? They all can really start to stack on top of each other. So you have a series of steps that you take. What you're doing is really creating this plan that includes step by step by step. So I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to experiment with the help that shows up. And then I'm going to communicate about what's working around the help. And Derek is saying delegate. Yeah, what can I delegate to? Who can I delegate to? You know what else I think you can use delegate for is who can I delegate this worry to? Meaning, whose worry is this really? So I think I'll delegate that worry to them. And it's not something that you would like give them a call or send them a text message and say, I'm delegating this worry to you. It could be something like, you know what? I don't think this is my worry. So I'm going to delegate it to someone else because they are better about worrying this. Yeah, Derek is saying in the chat room, you do not need to take care of or think about everything. And I found that really particularly helpful during the pandemic because boy, you could really worry about everything, right? And my mom actually has really good perspectives about situations. And she would say to me, you know, there's really brilliant people in the world and I believe in them. And so when I started to worry, I thought, you know what? There's brilliant people in the world. I'm going to let them figure this out through their worry. because they are better able to manage this than I am. So we can trust that there is help in the universe that we don't know or see or experience. So, this idea that there are brilliant people out there working on this was really comforting. I don't have to worry about it because there's brilliant people coming up with a vaccine, which was a miracle. I want to mention that we looked at two wheels, the worry wheel and the plan wheel, and each of them has 8 words. So 16 words in total, but that is not all the words. So the other really helpful part of these tools is they can spark ideas about other words. So as you look at the plan wheel, there's more than 8 words that can help you with a plan. I'm just curious if anybody has a word not on the wheel that can help them with a plan. I'll tell you one thing too is movement is a good word for a plan. So I talked about how I was in a situation last year, I would take a walk. And then that's when I would come up with the question. The movement, the walk took me out of the worrying. I was taking care of the worry when I went for a walk. And Derek is saying, pray. Absolutely. I will pray about this. It's the way that you turn it over to someone who has the ability to manage these situations. I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and the presenter was talking about an effective way to help people connect to help. And he said he has a colleague that when she leads a meeting, she'll start with a really simple, almost prayer. And it's everybody is quiet and they just repeat the word help. So you are quiet and say help. And then you say it again, help. And then you say it again, help. I thought that was really powerful because we have this idea that help is such a terrible thing to ask, right? We think, oh, I don't want to ask for help. I don't want anybody else to feel the burden of my problems. And really, help is around giving and receiving. We give help, and in order for someone else to feel good about the help they can provide, we have to receive it. So we want to give and receive. Help is one of those emotions that really does better when there's this nice give and receive. Love is the other one. There's more than that, but I think about help and love in that momentum of giving and receiving. And praying is a wonderful way, right? So when my mom was healthy, after dinner, she would sit in the living room with her rosary and would pray. So as a Catholic, the rosary became like a meditation for her. It was very calming to have the beads in hand and then say the prayer based on which bead her hand touched. That is a very powerful ritual to connect to a way to plan for your worries. I also think there are things that we can put on. So there's prayer shawls that you can wear. So if you feel like, boy, I'm really oppressed by these worries, I'm going to put a prayer shawl on. And that feels like it wraps you in support. You are no longer alone in your worries. You are wrapped in support. You are not worrying alone. The other thing that I like to do if I'm really feeling like, oh boy, I'm worrying, I like to open up essential oils. Again, it's a movement. And then I'll look to see which essential oil aroma I want, and then I'll pour a few drops in my diffuser, and I feel like I'm taking care of a worry. It's the movement. Okay. So oftentimes we hear about worries as these terrible things to avoid. But I think sometimes they are just triggers for us to make plans. So if we listen to a worry, we can think about it as a trigger to make a plan. If we are saying, I'm not going to listen to any of these worries, I'm just going to put them aside, I think we're asking too much of ourselves. So if we instead figure out a way to have a plan for our worries, then we can hear a worry, but it doesn't take over our day. We hear it and then we put a plan in place. It helps us feel a sense of control And again, we were talking about control earlier, that sometimes that's what the worrying is about, is we're looking for control. And if we can put a plan in place, we can find control. So it's a way of being empowered because of our worries, not powerless to them. So you probably have all heard that 90% or something like that of what we worry about never happens. But if you've been in a situation where something terrible has happened, that doesn't necessarily ring true to you because you think, but the 10% happened to me. So that's why I worry. So you might hear when you start to share your worries, someone say, 90% of what we worry about. And it's okay to say, I get that. Humor me. Just let me air this out. Sometimes it is starting a conversation about a worry with the what if, or I just want to share a concern. I know it might sound crazy to you, but I feel better just sharing it. So, what if this happens? I'm just curious, what do you think we should do? And that way it is positioned a little bit more in terms of having a conversation. It's a way to manage the pushback. I don't want to listen to worries. I'm not listening to worries. I totally get that. So just humor me for just a moment. What if? I think it also helps us be that much more compassionate to ourselves, right? Because we have a tendency to judge ourselves for worrying. I'm just worrying so much, and everybody tells me I worry too much, but I can't stop worrying. Well, you're worrying because you're looking for a plan and you just haven't found the plan yet. You just haven't made that pivot from worry to plan, and now you can. So you can worry and now you can move to plan. The other thing I'll mention too is sometimes it might feel like, okay, I don't necessarily have a plan for this worry, so what do? You find a focus for your moment. If there's a worry and you still haven't figured out the plan and you're not even sure there's a plan for it, find a focus for your moment. And it could be the focus for the moment is I'm going to work, I'm going to walk, I'm going to pray. So if there's not a plan, find the focus and stay right in the moment with your focus. Rather than moving into the future or going back in the past, stay in the moment, which is what you can control, and think about, okay, what's my focus for this moment? My focus is Googling for resources. My focus is making a decision that is the best decision right now, knowing that I can make a different decision when I have different information. Focus on the now. What can I do right now? Sometimes, too, right now, I can forgive myself. I can release myself from judgment. I can move into my next moment, having released myself with forgiveness. And then something else you can say when it feels like people are really giving you a hard time about your worries. It can sound like this: I just couldn't have predicted what my life would have become. For me, worries have become my reality. It's difficult for me to simply just stop worrying. I feel better talking out my worries. Thank you for listening. It could even just be the simple last two statements. I just feel better talking out my worries. Thank you for listening. Because we do feel better talking out our worries. It's just that sometimes we can't find the right listener. And it could be that you have a plan for the right listener with your worries. And the plan could be that you journal your worries, because the journal is the best listener for you right now. Or you talk to your dog or your cat with your worries. Maybe you talk out a worry and you pet your cat at the same time, and that's what helps you feel like, okay, I've got a plan for this worry. It's when the worries stay inside, I think, that we have the hardest time. So, really, what we're talking about is putting the worries out in a way that feels like, okay, I'm taking care of this worry. It is not taking care of me. Okay, we're going to create a breathing exercise. And what we're going to do is breathe in and breathe out. And as you breathe in, I want you to breathe in a word that describes your plan. So it could be experiment, it could be build, it could be change, it could be delegate. You're going to breathe in that word, and then you're going to breathe out the word worry. So I'll lead you through the exercise. I'll prompt you to take a breath in and breathe in your word and breathe out your worry. So go ahead and get comfortable where you're sitting. And if you can, put your feet firmly on the floor with your palms resting on top of your legs. You can close your eyes or not. It is up to you. Okay, so take a deep breath in and then take a deep breath out. And another breath in and another breath out. As you continue to breathe in and breathe out, follow the sound of my voice. And if you hear anything in your environment, just let that noise float past your awareness. You're focusing on my voice and on your breathing. You're breathing in and you're breathing out. For your next breath in, I want you to breathe in your plan. And then I want you to breathe out the worry. I want you to breathe in that word that is your plan and breathe out that worry. You have a plan, and I want you to breathe it in, really receive it, and then breathe out that worry. You've taken care of it. You no longer have to carry it. Another breath in of your plan and a breath out of your worry. Breathe in your plan and breathe out your worry. Go ahead and do this another 3 times at your pace, breathing in your plan and breathing out your worry. You have your plan, you're receiving it. You're breathing out your worry because you've taken care of it. Breathe in your plan and breathe out your worry. I'm going to count to 5. If you have your eyes closed, when I reach 5, you're going to open up your eyes. 1, 2, 3. When I reach 5, you're going to be refreshed and relaxed. Your eyes open. 4 and 5. So go ahead and open your eyes if you've had them closed and come back to us. And tell me how that felt. Okay, yeah, I'm glad it was a good release for you, Julita. Refreshing, yes. This is something that you can do anywhere, anytime. And it took us no more than 2 minutes. You can replace the words. So instead of a plan, you can breathe in relaxation, and instead of a worry, you can breathe out stress. So whatever you want, you breathe it in, and whatever you're ready to release, you let it out. It makes sense, right? You're breathing in what you want. You're breathing out what no longer serves you. You could be breathing in love and letting go of anger. You could be breathing in courage and letting go of fear. It's really helpful. I read it in a book, and heck, if I can remember the name of the book, I'll have to follow up with the name of the book. I thought it was so helpful, this breathing in what you want and breathing out what no longer serves you. And again, this is something you can do anytime, anywhere. That's what's so beautiful about it. And it only takes no more than 2 minutes. You could do it for a minute and feel that relaxation, feel that power of the plan. Okay, and we are done. I'm happy to take any questions before we close. I'm just going to put some information in the chat room. So I'm going to include a link to our evaluation form. You have 3 business days to complete the evaluation form. Let me go ahead and stop the share. You're also going to get an email at 10 minutes past the hour with your link to the evaluation form. I'm also going to put in there, if you're interested in my work around compassion fatigue and specifically those caregiving fatigues, I'll put a link to my book. And then our next webinar around healing is around guilt fatigue. So that's the first Wednesday in June. There's a link to that. And then we're also doing some advocacy work to increase support for family caregivers. If that's something you're interested in, I included a link to our campaign to act, so you can check that out. And again, if anybody has any last questions or thoughts before we close, I'd be happy to answer any of them. I think what's most important is that you feel like you have a plan for your worries, and that you have the realization that the worry is the trigger to create a plan. And if there isn't a plan, then it's about creating the focus. What can I do right now in this moment to feel better? And you could use the breathing exercise to find the focus. Okay. Thanks everybody so much for being here. This was very relaxing for me, so thank you all so much. And I wish you all a good rest of today. And hopefully I'll see you in June for our next webinar around healing our caregiving fatigues. Okay, thanks everyone.